Welcome back to the Realm of Unpopular Opinions. I sincerely hope that this video will be somewhat instructive because I assumed before I've even started doing it that it's going to be long and it is going to be comprehensive. This is the video of all of my classic books editions. I was considering just doing my favorites or something like that, but I think it's very interesting to watch these types of videos because you learn about many different editions that you never knew existed. I certainly do whenever I watch these videos. Now, since I have a lot of classics and all of them are in different editions, this is going to be an interesting video to film because one segment could be a minute long, another could be 10 minutes long. I doubt it's going to be 10 minutes long because then the video would be ageless, but either way, I have too many editions. When I started listing them, this is like the paper that I have them all listed on, the paper just started filling up because I realized that I have so many random or obscure editions where I own just one book in the collection. So we're going to go through pros, cons, and I will certainly save my favorites for last because I think that's just interesting and I have the most of those editions. So let's just get into it, and a few disclaimers before we begin. I do not care about editions that much, what they look like, how they feel, whether they're stiff or floppy. I obviously prefer floppy books and I prefer pretty editions, but that isn't a deal breaker for me. Often a deal breaker for me is the price because books are expensive mostly. So whenever I find a cheap edition or collection that is very readable, as in the font, margins, and everything is very decent and good for your eyesight, I do not care what the book looks like, as you will see, because so many of these books are, in my opinion, in very ugly editions, but I do still buy them. So let's just work our way up. That is the first disclaimer. The second one is that I do not care about extra bibliography in the book. Notes on the text, introductions, further reading. These things are made for studying these books because they are mostly classics. I do not study books. I haven't studied books since I was in high school, and I do not care to. So none of these things are what I look for when I buy a copy because I never read them. I've never in my life read an introduction or a bibliography or a citations on the text or further reading because that is just not something that interests me. I will occasionally glance at the introduction for some historical context on the author, but generally that is not why I buy these books. So what you will not be getting from me is how much extra content of that kind there is in these editions, because that is not something I look out for, and that is not something that I care about. I might mention it sometimes when there's a particularly long edition that has extras, but overall that is not what I will be talking about. I will probably mention translations as well. I will mention whether books have a good typography when they're long or when they're short, because there are exceptions like that. You can buy some books with a very nice print, but not if they're very long, because then the font is too small. Too many caveats, too many disclaimers. Let's just get into it, and I will try and not waste my time on all of these editions because there are genuinely so many. Just looking at how many different editions I have, I felt overwhelmed to do this video. So let's just get into it. The first edition we have is the Penguin Popular Classics. It is this edition, very old. This is what it looks like. I might do like a close-up for everything. Does not floppy at all. These are old editions of classics, and I did not buy any of these. These, when were they printed? Let me see, actually. Yeah, in the 90s, basically. These are the old editions of popular classics. My parents bought all of these. I think I have Oscar Wilde, Shakespeare, Jungle Book, a lot of stuff in these editions that I haven't actually personally bought or read. So I wanted to just show these off in case anyone wanted to collect these and found them like in thrift shops or whatever. But let's not dwell on this one because personally, I don't really like any of the books in this edition, so I cannot tell you much about them, but they are very well printed. They have a thick lettering style. They also have illustrations, and as far as extra stuff goes, I don't think they have anything. They just go straight into the story, and they finish with the story. So these do not have any extra content for those who care about that kind of thing. The next one is the Gollancz Classics, and they are these books, the ones with the picture. the white, the white, what is it called, footer and random letters. Also not floppy, also very stiff, but they are very readable. They have a decent enough font, and they are very cheap in my experience. I almost bought Hunchback of Notre Dame in this edition, but I realized that I don't want to read the book, but for reference, that's a very, very long book, and it cost about €7. So very cheap editions. This is just the poems of Edgar Allan Poe. I think this is the one edition that I have of this. It also doesn't have any extra content. It's just poems, and in the beginning, I think there's like a brief introduction about the author and the times, and very, very brief. It just gets straight into the poems. Now, these are not that aesthetically pleasing, but they are very cheap, and they're well put together, and I think you can find so many long classics in these editions. Now, I cannot obviously vouch for the font in the longer books like Hunchback, but this one has a very, very decent font. Next up, we have Warbler classics. Now, there's one very large downside to this, and that is that they are large, okay? This is The Blue Castle by L.M. Montgomery. It is an enormous book. This isn't exactly A4. It is something between A4 and A5. Now, floppiness, a little bit better than the other two, but not really. White pages, definitely white pages, and font is fine. I don't really love it, but it is fine. Also doesn't have any extra stuff. It just goes into the book. It does have like some history about Montgomery in the back, but that's kind of it. Now these, I bought this for the cover. I think they have really, really pretty covers. What is this size though? What is this size? I would never read a book this size. I think that's sort of what's put me off reading this, because there's just nothing appealing about a book this size. I'm sorry. Like, what is this compared to my head? Why is there a book that's this specific size? I don't like it. No illustrations or anything. And it's serviceable, but I would never buy these again. Now, I don't know if all of the books in the Warbler Classics editions are this size, but this was just not it when I ordered it, and when it got to me, I was immediately put off reading it. So the next one we have here is, I am trying to find the name of the edition, Virago Modern Classics. I struggle with saying that. I have Rebecca in this copy. This is a copy that many people have. This is what the spine looks like. Floppiness is nil. It just doesn't flop at all. It is very stiff. So you're going to have to break the spine on this one. You could technically read it like this without breaking the spine, but not the best copy in terms of floppiness. The paper quality is nice, though. It's not really completely white. It's a little bit yellow, but that could also be just because my copy is used, so I cannot really help you with that. I think the font is fine. It might be a little bit too tiny. I'm going to include a short clip of what the font looks like, but might be a little bit too tiny, but overall I think it's decent enough. Now, these are modern classics, so there's not that much bibliography or like historical context, but it still gets straight into the story. There's nothing, and there's nothing in the end either. There's just, I think there's like a short afterword by a scholar or something, but yeah, that's kind of it. There's a short afterword, nothing else besides that. Now, I didn't like this book, so I cannot even tell you that much about the inside of it, but if you're looking for sort of appealing, more modern classics, I think this is a decent way to go, and the spine looks okay enough. So this is just one collection that I've seen like where I live, but I haven't seen anyone online or own it, and that is this copy by Octopus Books of the classic works of Robert Louis Stevenson. I think there's a few more in the collection, but this is like what it looks like. It's a hardcover. It collects the works of Robert Louis Stevenson. Now, the one downside to this is the fact that the font is tiny. Like, objectively, I can read it, but the font is tiny, and I feel like if you at all struggle with your eyesight, this would just not be the copy for you. I also think it could have very easily been longer, and the font could have been larger, so something to keep in mind. It's just not that great. I will obviously leave the clip. Now, without the dust jacket, it is just a plain blue hardcover, so I think they are decent copies if you want like collections of an author's works. I think they are decent enough for that, but if I didn't like Robert Louis Stevenson that much, I probably would have just opted for individual books. Next one isn't even my book, but it is this copy of Master and Margarita by Bulgakov. It is Picador. I think it's an American copy. It's beautiful. Again, I DNF'd this book recently, did not like it, but beautiful, beautiful copy. Flops, yes, but what really drew me to it is how inky the print is. Like, this is delightful on the eyes. This is what I want every single book to look like. This is beautiful, and I will leave a clip of this as well because it's just stunning. So I would highly recommend these if you can find them at all anywhere, but stunning. Let's work through all the enormous hardcovers. We have Chartwell books. Now, these, when I bought them, were about 13 or 14 euros for like the big hardcovers. They have very pretty art. They're pretty on the shelf. This is the complete works of Jane Austen. However, pretty and cheap as they are, there's a reason why they are this cheap. Also, when you take them off, it's also a plain pink hardcover. There's a reason they are this cheap though, and the reason is the font. It is biblical. Not only is it tiny and the spacing isn't that large, but it is very thinly printed. So the letters are thin and they are small. This is just not a readable copy. Again, I could read it. But not comfortably. I don't think I would like having this big a page be this full with such thin, tiny letters. This would just be very tedious and very tiring to read. And I would not recommend this. I bought it because I just wanted the complete works of Jane Austen to have. And this was very cheap. So I was like, excellent. It's a great deal. You get all of them. It's a hardcover, but the font is a very big downside if you do not see. So if you have struggled with thin, small fonts at all, or spacing, do not get this at all. However, I've also seen paperback versions of the complete works of Jane Austen. Just do not get the complete works of Jane Austen. They are never printed well, that I've seen at least, so just get them individually and do yourself a favor. It's a pretty book. I have it on my shelf. Will I ever read it? I don't really know. We'll move on to my most expensive books that I actually own, and one of them is the complete Dune trilogy in this faux leather hardcover binding. Looks very, very nice. I think this is, how do you say, I don't know, Gollancz London, basically. I will leave the title in the chapters, obviously, but it's one of the most expensive books that I own. Obviously, I took a bit of a limb with this one. I went on a bit of a limb with this one because I did not read any but the first Dune book, so splurging on this was a bit of a risk, but luckily I loved the entire trilogy. And the great thing about it is this is also one of my favorite prints. Similar to Master and Margarita, it has a very thick, inky, beautiful font. It is spaced perfectly. The margins are just big enough. It's just wonderfully made, and it should be because of its price. I don't know how many books there are in this edition, but my father also has, what is it called? The Conan books in this edition. I also saw the Necronomicon in this edition. So I don't know how many they do, but I think they're mostly classics and like big classics from the last century. So stunning. I would highly recommend it if you really like the books. There's a second one of Dune with like silver instead of gold on the black, but I don't care to read the second trilogy. So I just have this first one, and it is worth the money that you're spending on it if you really like what's inside, obviously. The next stunning book worth its money are these, the Canterbury classics. They are beautiful. They have the foiled edges. They are wonderfully put together hardcovers. They have ribbon bookmarks. They're just an absolute delight to read. Beautifully printed, wonderful, wonderful font and decorations around the numbers and everything. These are my prized possessions. All of these books I splurged on specifically because I really wanted them. This one is a collection of poems by Robert Frost. I will show you the other two that I have in a second. I also have this one, which is like Gods and Heroes of Ancient Greece, which is stunning. Like, it's beautiful. Also has gilded edges. They also have like these beautiful end papers that are like paintings. It also has ribbon. It's stunning. The font, beautiful. However, I did not know that these were not the same editions, I will say, because they're kept in the same section of my bookstore. This one is Pantheon Books, which is a division of Penguin Random House, which confuses me. I genuinely thought these were the same editions. Like, they're made the same, they're the same size-ish, they have the same gilded page. I thought they were the same edition. So let me pull out my last book in this collection that I thought was one collection, and we will see if they are actually the same thing. This one is a Barnes & Noble copy of Complete Works of Edgar Allan Poe. This is definitely my most prized possession in terms of appearances, silver, ribbon bookmark. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful book. I literally bought this during the pandemic when my local bookstore that had been like closed for a while because obviously everything was closed was for a month. They had like a 30% off on everything. I think that's when I bought this. Definitely that's when I bought this because these are very expensive books. But this I bought literally on the last day of that sale because it was 30% and I wanted to have this really badly because I found it so pretty. So not a single one of these three are the same edition. I didn't know because they genuinely look like the same edition in my bookstore. They are in the same place. So I didn't know, but I've told you all the different publishers, and basically these are just deluxe editions made by different presses, apparently, which I didn't know because they all have the same features. They all look the same. They all have the same extras. They all have the bookmark. They all have the beautiful design. They're all very expensive. So splurge on these as you will, but I wouldn't necessarily look at these in terms of publisher because honestly, I thought all of these were Barnes & Noble exclusive editions or fancy editions or whatever, but I think they're all worth the money. I think the thing with these though is that you really have to be certain it is something you want to own before buying it, because if you don't splurge on things just to have them on your shelf, you're going to want to read them. I dip into this literally every year. This I have done like studies on. I have a notebook where I do like independent studies on things that interest me. Did studies on this. I love ancient Greece, like Greek gods and everything so much. And then Robert Frost, which is like one of my two favorite poets. So I'd say that these three are worth splurging on only if you know you really want to read what's inside them. Let's move on to some other editions that I just have one copy of. The Anne of Green Gables series, or rather trilogy. I do not have a single book in the same edition. It just happened that way. But I specifically searched this one out, which is the Puffin Classics, because I loved this. It's floppy, beautiful print. It's just a delight to read. And I really, really wanted a book that was a delight to read. I specifically sought this one out, again, because it was a delight to read. Absolute delight. Now, this does have some extra stuff, and I think this is just children's classics, but I could be wrong. This starts with an introduction, then it goes into the book, and in the end, there's all kinds of extra stuff. I think that's specifically for children. There's like a bit about the author. There's a character list. There is some things to think about while reading the novel. There is a recipe for a pie for some reason, which I think is actually kind of a cool idea. There's a glossary of words, obviously. So I think this is a great addition if you want some children's classics, and I would say it's worth annotating as well if you do that kind of thing, because the margins are pretty wide, and I think the paper is decent if you don't use like the inkiest markers that you have, but I do not write in my books anyway, so that doesn't matter to me. But if you do, this is the info. The next one is Anne of Avonlea, and that this is Macmillan's Collector's Library. They are the pocket-sized, small, tiny books with gilded edges, with a bookmark. They are also cloth-bound underneath with a design, with like a minty design, and the covers are all sort of illustrations from the book, and there's like a main quote from the book. Now, one thing to note about these is that the font, clearly, because it's this small of a book, very tiny. Like, I'd say it's readable. It's actually a delightful book to read. I obviously annotated it quite a bit, and I took it with me, actually, in year 2 of university when I was like commuting quite a bit. I took this with me and I read it for like a month on and off. It was a delight to read. So I would say it's readable and it's great, but especially when you get into the longer books, because this has longer books, like it has Tolstoy, it has Dostoevsky, it has, I think, also Victor Hugo. So if you want the longer books, I think the tiny font could kind of, the tiny page and the tiny font could kind of feel like you're reading from your phone. It literally is kind of like a little bit bigger than screen size. And the font, I think, can be tiny if you're reading a longer book. So I would look into these, maybe get them for like books that you've either already read or you want a prettier copy of, because these are great. And I know people like and recommend them, but I've just never really felt drawn to getting any other books in this edition because I don't really like how small it is. Like, it's convenient, but I don't like reading from such a small book. I only bought Anne of Avonlea because I wanted to read Anne of Avonlea, and this was the first copy that I found. I didn't search this copy out, and I personally don't even really like them that much. I know people love them. I know they're really pretty, which they are, and I know they're pocket-sized, but when I want to read a book, I don't want it to be as small as possible, if that makes any sense. So this is a bit of a personal preference thing, but I would say that you should look out for the font on this one, because even this, which is a short, tiny book, I think the font is a tad bit too small. So for long books, look into the font. Also, in addition to where I just have one copy, The Modern Library, I just have Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. In this edition, this is what it looks like. Floppy as hell, you know, I love it. I love it. Beautiful, readable, you can bend it. It's a delight to read. Excellent font, beautiful. Now, since this is a philosophy book and a very old one, there's an introduction, there's chronology, index of persons, notes, there's all kinds of stuff here. But this is what it looks like. I've annotated quite a bit of it. I would say that these are very readable, very accessible, very annotating friendly, specifically because like this is philosophy. So if you want to go to town on that, do and look into it or whatever. But I haven't really seen these around, to be honest, except this one. Now, I never look for editions to collect because none of my books look the same. I don't think a single series that I own looks the same on my shelves. So that is not what I look for. But I specifically looked for this one when I was looking for the Meditations to buy, because I read them as an ebook, so I wanted a physical copy because I liked the cover. Specifically because of this cover, I bought this edition. So I did not even know that this like collection of classics existed. I don't know what their bibliography is. I don't know what other editions of books you have in this edition. So I am really not certain, but it is also, I think, an American copy. So beautiful, beautiful, lovely, and I adore it, but I am not sure how easy to find it is. We moved on to the main event, and I think these are the less obscure, the more popular classics that everyone actually collects. Now, this book, I only have one book inside this edition, but I am getting more because I really, really like them, and that is obviously the Oxford classics. Now, this is what they look like, the red little stripe, they're white, but that's not why I like them, it is this. This is why. Floppy, delightful, very easy to like bend. I don't think you can break the spine of this unless you tried. Smooth, lovely pages, beautifully printed. I love these. I think these were genuinely made for studying because there's a lot of extras. Here, there's introduction, note on the text, selected bibliography, chronology of the author, appendix, explanatory notes. Like, there's a lot of extra stuff in this, which is not why I buy them, but I think they are actually made to be studied. The covers, though, I think the covers are horrendous. Like, I've not seen a single edition of this, the single copy inside this edition that has a pretty cover. So, not a cover buy, but it's a comfort read buy. I will get another 2 books in this edition because of how comfortable and just delightful and easy they are to read. I think this is what a book should be like when you read it. It's beautiful, but since I just have the one copy, Phantom of the Opera, obviously, since I just have the one copy, I did not really want to like highlight it near the end, because while I do love it and I'm bending it and I like it quite a bit, I just have one book, so I shouldn't really speak on it quite yet. I think the next ones I want to talk about are the Vintage Classics library. Now, I have 2 to show off, one with the red spine and one with the white spine. The one with the white spine, I think, are like the cheapest. I have many in this edition because they cost like €5, like something great like that. So thin, this is what they look like. Not that impressive of a cover, but it is what it is. Easily readable, floppy enough. I think it's a decent print. It might be like a little bit faint, but it's still great. This is, again, Edgar Allan Poe, and it just has the books. It doesn't have any extras. These are not meant to be studied, but they are meant to be read. I have also my 2 George Orwells in this edition. I like this edition. So when I can get something that I'm not like overly enthused about, but I still want to read in this edition, I will get it. But it's it's the cheap white one. But the vintage classics that are like, I think, specific to authors and that are way more common are the Red Spines, and this is Name of the Rose by Eco. This is what it looks like on the back. These are not floppy though, like at all. At all. So I think when I do read this, especially because it's a chunky book, it's like what? 550 pages, I will break the spine. That is something to know. If you do not have these in thin editions, you will be breaking the spine of this. So if you do not like that, I think the spine's already broken just from what I did, because I haven't read this yet. But something to keep in mind if you don't like your spines to be broken. Now the font. One other complaint I have is the font. The paper is great. Thick quality. I think it's excellent. Tiny though. 550 pages in this book. I think it's pretty tiny for some reason. I will include a clip of it, but as far as fonts go, it's not the best. It's really not the best. And it's kind of funny to me that I keep mentioning the font because I can read all of these. Like, I don't have a problem with reading them. But I think even if you're not like genuinely blind when it's super tiny and you cannot read it at all, it's just a comfort level. Like, a lot of the books that I mentioned before are way more comfortable for me to read, even though I can read this. Like, this isn't that comfortable. There's something about a page just being so full that isn't comfortable to read. Psychologically, there's something about it that makes you feel like the book is way longer than it is. And I don't really like it. Just flipping through it, like, this doesn't attract me, you know? Like, it doesn't look readable. Now, I will read it, and I want to read it because it's one of my mother's favorite books. However, it does not attract me with what it looks like. So I would look out for the font. Also, as far as extras, I don't think it has any. There's like a map and there's an author's postscript, but I don't think there is anything else in this book. Note to the new edition, yeah, nothing about studying this book. So I would really check into this to see if you can read it at all and if you find it comfortable to read, because I'm not that big of a fan. These are actually way better. The cheap ones, because this is like a normal price for a book, like 14 or 15 euros. This one, way more comfortable to read, even though it's cheap. And that is a trend that you will actually see. A lot of the time, cheaper books are my favorites to read. Now, my third favorite, and I know it's everyone's favorite, it is Penguin. Black spines or whatever. I mean, there's obviously, I think, where like there's orange and then when there's white. But I will talk about 3 Penguin books today. I will bring out all 3 so that you can see the difference. This is, I think, like the old version where the font is like this. This is Count of Monte Cristo. Then I have the Epic of Gilgamesh, although I can see that that's kind of a similar edition, which is not really what I was going for. Anyway, besides the point, we will be talking about these, and then we will be talking about the small penguins. So, Epic of Gilgamesh. Lovely, delightful, floppy. This is what it looks like. The people love how these look on their shelves. Very readable, great font. These are a delight to read on the inside. It's very clear when you have illustrations and images. However, there's one severe downside to this, and that is that they wear horribly. Like, I read this once. It already looks like it's been read like 30 times. Genuinely. Count of Monte Cristo. This is the second one that I'm going to bring out. Yes, also floppy, great, excellent. Creased on the front. Severely broken spine. Creased here. Like, these books wear terribly. Actually, I have another book in this edition that is way over there. I'm not going to get it right now, but it came to me as if it had been read 30 times. So if you want to keep these pristine, it's just not going to happen. And they are not actually cheap. I thought they were, considering how poorly made they are. Like, on the outside, the print inside is great, but how poorly made they are on the outside, I thought they'd be cheaper than they are. They're also actually like, what, 14, 15 euros. So unless you find these used, and you might as well, because they're going to look used if you've read them once. I would definitely not splurge on these unless you really don't care how your books look. But one thing that is a plus side is that you should get long books in this edition. That is definitely a fact, because I had the Count of Monte Cristo in another edition. It was just not readable. It is like, what, 1,200, 1,300 pages? Not readable. The font was just too bad even for me. So this one is printed great, and you can see that it is a brick, and it is a brick for a reason. So long books, I'd highly recommend the Penguins. However, they're going to look like they've been read 33 times. Again, the Epic of Gilgamesh, I literally didn't even read it because I read this as an ebook. I just like flipped through it to add my tabs. It already has a crease on the spine. So if you want to keep these pristine, it is simply not going to happen. And the last thing that we're going to talk about are the small black classics. Now, I have essentially all of them because I have the box set and I bought like the extras that came after it. I don't have all of them because I didn't want to own all of them, but I do have them. There's two types of small black classics that you can get. There's these. They're like teeny tiny, super thin. And then you have these that are thick. So basically a little bit thicker. Now these two, it depends on what the book is. I think these are like 50-ish pages and these are 100-ish pages, give or take 10 pages. So depends on what book you want to get, depends on what you're interested in, but these are also great, but I have the same flaw that I think the big ones do, and that is that they get damaged very, very easily. So easy to read. I think the font is nice, the paper is nice, it's delightful, but there is a better version of small classics in terms of print. But if you're interested in any of the stories that the small classics have, look into them because I think they're also very cheap and actually worth the money considering how poorly made they are. Now let's talk about my second favorites. I'm just looking into it because I have so many books around me that half of them are falling over, and these are going to be the clothbound classics. I have the small ones, I have the big ones. Let's talk about them. Now, people buy these as trophies because they're really, really beautiful, very nice thematically and literally. On the inside, the print is beautiful, the paper is thick, the designs are wonderful. People actually ironically don't like these because they wear poorly, like the penguins, but everyone likes the penguins, which I find a little bit funny, I have to say, because I see this all the time. Everyone's like, buy the penguins instead of this. They're way more worth the money. They're way better. But however, the penguins are actually less durable than these, and they cost the same. At least where I live, they cost about the same. You're not going to find these for like over 20 euros, and these are like 14 to 15. So it's pretty comparable in price. And considering that the penguins also don't wear well at all, I'd actually say splurge on these if you want to, because for your favorite books or something like that. Also, people say that these aren't really readable. However, that is incorrect. That is incorrect, at least in my case, because this is Jane Eyre. This is the only like large clothbound that I own because I bought this when I wanted to read Jane Eyre again. I wanted a pretty copy of Jane Eyre. It has a bookmark. I read it. My dad read it. Like, it's been read twice in this edition. Not a problem. Like, not a crease. Nothing happened to it. Like, people say you cannot read these. Maybe because they think like it's uncomfortable to read, but you can open it decently and nothing's going to happen to it. Like, nothing. It is very readable, and it has beautiful print and think pages and the bookmark. I repeat, like, these are readable. You can open them decently, as you can see. Like, you don't have to read them like this, as I've seen like some people show off in their videos. This book has been read twice. Literally nothing is wrong with it. Nothing is wrong with it. I'd actually argue that they wear better than the penguins. So I think whoever started the rumor that these like are unreadable and they are ruined the first time that you read them, I don't know which copy you read and what happened to it or how you read your books, but I did not have a single problem with it. It's been read twice. Nothing's wrong with it. Nothing's broken. The spine is fine. Like, it was a delight to read, and they're beautiful. So I actually have nothing but the best to say about these books. One thing to note is that the designs will probably get like a little bit faded if you handle and touch them a lot, which will be the case with the small clothbounds. However, again, since they're comparable in price to the penguins that immediately look very red, get them. If there's a book in this edition you want to get and they're beautiful, just get them. I will be the person to tell you to do that because I love my clothbounds, and I have read from them and nothing has happened. The other thing is these small clothbounds. Now, I love them. They're beautiful in design. They're stunning. I'm working through them. I'm going to collect a few, but I think they're stunning. This is The Snow Country and Ice by Anna Kavan. The one thing that you have to know, though, also on this clothbound is that if you take the sticker off, there's going to be a mark there. So just leave the sticker on if you care about that kind of stuff, but I don't. I don't really care about that kind of stuff. They're also the same as the big clothbounds. Same thing. They're beautiful. They're readable. They just don't have the bookmark, but you can read them no problem. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. They're actually extremely durable and sturdy, and apart from the design getting like a little bit smudged off, I suppose, from the oils on your fingers, there's literally nothing wrong with them. Just, you can read them as many times as you want, and the spine actually isn't going to break or crease like the penguins. So if you were on the fence about these, I think it's time to get a second opinion from someone who's actually read from these books and they've been loved. I don't really care about the state of my books and they still look new. So get them. By all means, get them. I know everyone says you cannot read from them and that they get damaged very easily. I have not had a single experience like that, and I have quite a few. I actually have like 5 or 6 of these small clothbounds, so I call bullshit, at least somewhat. The last thing I wanted to mention about the penguins is my edition of East of Eden by Steinbeck. This was a special collection of like penguin orange classics, orange collection. They did like a specific 70th anniversary, the orange collection. They like did some books in this collection. I think there's like a list of how many books they did. Yeah, they did like, I think they're all American. Doesn't matter. Either way, if you can get these, I mean, they're stunning. They're beautifully, beautifully made. They have one of those things that like pops out. It's a wonderful font, beautifully readable. Like, I love these books so much. There's just 2 downsides for me. One is that I hate this type of material, which is like the buttery type where you can see every single fingerprint that's ever been on the book. I hate that. However, and the other thing that's like a downside for some people is the deckled edges. These all have deckled edges, and I will talk about that again because there's another edition that has it. If you don't like deckled edges, do not get this. Do not get this. However, I adore them. I am the #1 deckled edges lover, okay? There's something about imperfections on things, like intentional imperfections, that scratches an itch in my brain. I love it so much. I love how imperfect this is. I also love mugs that like look like they were handcrafted and like ink spilled. Like, I love imperfect things, used things. I love it so much. So beautiful, beautiful edition, and I'm very happy to have it because this is my one and only Steinbeck that I adored and loved. And similar to this, even though it's not the same edition, but it is also Penguin, and I wanted to mention it, is these, which are the, what are they called? Deluxe classics. They have like a full spread illustration like this, where it's like one image. They also have the flap, like it's the exact same edition as this, except the material isn't the one that leaves fingerprints. But they all have like these pretty illustrations, and they are also beautifully printed. They're exactly like the orange penguin collection, the mushrooms. And they also have the deckled edges. So I adore them. I have 2 of these so far because a lot of the books in the collection I just do not want to have. But this is Shirley Jackson, still arguably my favorite Shirley Jackson. We Have Always Lived in the Castle. And I also recently bought another one, which is, again, ironically, a John Steinbeck book in this edition with the deckled edges and the beautiful illustrations. So I would highly recommend these 2 if you do not mind deckled edges, because they're just beautiful copies to have. And they're not that expensive. I think I bought John Steinbeck for around 17 euros, so we're still talking under 20. I think the only books over 20 that I mentioned were the really fancy hardcovers. Books that I will be mentioning before I take a break for my class, and then I will finish it with my favorites in the evening, are the loves of my life, and they are the modern classics, Penguin modern classics. Now we have the tiny one and the normal sized one. I think I have a lot of them like in another room, but all my Shirley Jacksons are in this edition because I just love them so much. They're the ones with the minty spine with some information. Also really, really floppy. Delightful to read. They also have a bit of like a muted white, and the font in this one I think is my favorite font ever. Like specifically this font, specifically how it's printed. These are the most comfortable books to read, like by far. These are delightful. There's one downside, and that is that sometimes there's a bit of a misprint where like you can still read it, obviously, but I think it's in one of my other Shirley Jacksons. I think it could be this one, which is like her collection of stories, like The Lottery and Other Stories. I think there was a bit of a misprint where it was like a bit faint and there it looks like the printer kind of broke when it was printing it, but it's still readable. So I would highly recommend these. They're delightful. Modern classics, basically everything from the 20th century. And then there are also the small classics. I also have the box set of these, so I have technically the entire collection of these. They're minty all around, unlike the other ones that just have the minty cover. And they have the same font, and they're beautiful to read. Like, I love these. The fact that I didn't like a lot of the modern classics doesn't matter, because that's just a preference thing. However, as far as reading goes, beautiful, 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 genuinely. And let me see what extras they have. I don't think that many. They do have a foreword, but I think that's it. Just a foreword, but they're beautiful, and I would highly recommend them. And we will get to my favorites later. It's later. I do apologize. I got very cold, and it's the nighttime. We've reached the end. My favorite edition. And it might surprise some people who are into editions to learn that this one is my favorite. And it is, I have 4 books to show you. I will briefly hold them up. It is the Wordsworth editions. Now, they are the cheapest, the easiest to find, and I think that they have like the most range. And let's see why. First off, we have Anne of Green Gables. Now, this are like the collector's editions, and I've only seen this specific copy in bookstores for children's books. Now, this is what it looks like from this side. Normal pages. Opens flat, which is beautiful, delightful. It has wonderful, wonderful creamy paper. It has excellent lettering. It is wonderful to read. Now, why do I love these so much? Because of how comfortable they are. And this will crop up with the rest of the Wordsworths. So let me just run through all of them, and then I will go through pros and cons. Also, this, I don't think that has anything extra. It just has the book. There's nothing extra. The next one we have is the Wordsworth Poetry Collection. We have Tennyson. I have actually all of the poetry collections that I bought so far, which is like Burns, Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson. I have all of them in this edition, and I specifically sought them out. Floppy as hell. Beautiful. Beautiful to flip through. This is what it looks like. Wonderful. Then we have 2. These are like the normal ones, like the Wordsworth classics, but there's a difference. I think these are like the old ones with this type of lettering. And then you have the new ones with this type of lettering. I obviously prefer the old ones, but let's take a look at this. I on purpose picked a thick book and a thin book. Can you tell I'm getting excited? So this is the Cameron by Boccaccio. It's a very thick book. As you can see, maintains the flop. Wonderful. Wonderful. Readable, beautiful. Now, they also actually have a lot of extra stuff. Okay, so introduction, author's preface. What else does it have? Author's conclusion. Beautiful copy. Beautiful copy. And then we have the classic Wordsworth editions that I think you find everywhere, and it is this one. So this is just Villette by Charlotte Bronte. I could have picked literally any single one. Floppy, floppy, wonderful, beautiful, and very, very easily readable. Like, if I can do this with a book, you know it's a good book. Like, you know it's a good book. And then the last one, which I actually didn't know it was a Wordsworth edition, it is the Sherlock Holmes collection. I did not know this was a Wordsworth book. This one obviously also has illustrations. This is sort of, it looks like the newspaper, and the paper really looks and feels like it's the newspaper. Now, as far as pros and cons go, let's explore the pros and cons of these books. The pros are how cheap they are. All of them, as far as I've seen, except like maybe this one, are €5, €5 to €6. I think that's how much I paid for them. So very lovely, very accessible, very cheap. So that is obviously a massive, massive pro, I think. Very accessible, and they have a wide range of books. Now, it is my favorite, so I will look for any book that I actually want to buy in this edition. But there is one con, and that is that unlike the Penguins, it is not necessarily always well printed. For example, Villette by Charlotte Bronte, and I will include the clip of it. The font in here is nice. It's readable. It's not faint or anything. However, the spacing is a little bit tighter and it has smaller margins. So I'd say that you can definitely come across small fonts. So it really depends. I think that's the only problem. Now, obviously, I have a lot of them. I have the most books that I have in terms of one singular edition are these because I like them, I love them, and I will pick up books in this edition if I can. However, this is an example of a very long book. How long is it? It's like 800 pages, where it's readable. However, the Count of Monte Cristo I had in this edition unreadable because it is too long, and they made the font so small and the spacing like so tiny that it was unreadable. I had to get the Count of Monte Cristo in the Penguin edition because you just couldn't read it in the Wordsworth. So I would say look out for the length of the book. For example, this is 800 pages and it's actually really readable, which surprised me because I bought this way after Count of Monte Cristo. So I thought that this would also be unreadable, but it's pretty much okay. There's also a very long book. All of Charlotte Bronte's books, I think, are like 500 pages, 400, 500 pages. Very, very nice. I enjoy it. However, look into if it would be too small for you, and definitely be very careful about books over 1,000 pages because I think it's very possible that they would be unreadable. So like that's something to look out for. However, in terms of range, I'd say that if you want your books to match, there's one problem, and that is there's like new ones and old ones. I prefer the font of this one to this one. This one looks a little bit, like Comic Sansy, but that is up to you. The Sherlock Holmes books, I haven't seen anything else in this edition, so I honestly don't know what to recommend. And the poetry collections, I think they're lovely, they're beautiful, and they're also the complete works of a poet, mostly, unless they have like thousands upon thousands of poems. But I think they are stunning. This one especially, I'd highly recommend. However, in terms of just like, the regular collection of normal classics like these two, I'd say you need to be a little bit careful about book size and check into whether this is too small a font for you. But it is very nice and very pleasant for me because the page isn't all white. It's very, I was going to say paper-like, but it's very creamy and comfortable and just a delight to read. So floppy, you can throw them around, and that's one other thing. Unlike the Penguins, which everyone praises, and they're double the price of these do not get damaged. Now, they can get damaged, obviously, because every book can get damaged. They can get creased, they can get scuffed if you throw them around. Like, there are signs of wear, obviously. However, unlike the Penguins, you're not going to be able to break the spine on this because it's so loose and so floppy. I have never broken a spine on a single one of my Wordsworths. Now, I don't care about that, like, at all. But if you do, I think it's something to note, because if you're debating, like, between this and Penguin like, doesn't have a significantly larger font for you and you don't mind reading from these, I would recommend these, because genuinely I have so many of them that I've read and not a single one has a broken spine. So you can like do this to them. Like, you can just throw them around, throw them in your bag. They're not going to have a broken spine. They are floppy to high heaven. They are cheap. They are so readable and so accessible and so wide in their selection. So many like foreign authors, so many translations. That is one thing you should look into, the translations between like these and the Penguins if you're reading like translated work. But I honestly never really bothered with that. Like, I never really like sat down to check which translation I should read. So if you're into that, obviously look into that, but I'm not the person to ask for that type of thing. I love these editions to bits, and if I can find a book in this edition, I will absolutely buy the book in this edition. So like, these are my absolute favorites, and I feel like that's such a controversial take, because I always see these like at the bottom of the list, where it's like, if you really want to buy a cheap copy, buy this one. But again, throughout this video, I've had some pretty controversial takes about the Penguins, about the Wordsworth, and about the clothbounds, because I do not agree with what people are saying about them. This is just my personal experience, but maybe it's useful to you to get like an opposing opinion. So all of these books, all of these editions have some sort of flaw. But in my opinion, if you find these books with a readable font, you cannot go for a better and cheaper copy that you can't break this pine of. It is the ending of the video. I think I've gone through everything comprehensively. I've included clips of the font and what the book looks like, and I tried to show you every angle, and I tried to give you like positives and negatives about a single copy, about a single edition. Obviously, you can make up your own mind if aesthetics matter to you, if extra content matters to you, if bibliography matters to you, then you're going to need to make an informed decision about what you'd like to collect. However, if you are someone just looking into the best copies of classics that you're not going to damage too much and that you can buy without it costing an arm and a leg, these were my recommendations. Obviously, my most expensive books, those 4 hardcovers, I bought like for special occasions or at a huge discount. I don't even own special editions of books. I think my Wheel of Time books were like my most expensive acquisitions because they were very difficult to find. But overall, I do not splurge on books because I buy a lot of books. So it all depends on your preference. If you just buy special editions once every few months, you do you. But I buy a lot of books and I read a lot of books. So finding something cheap that wears well, that is very readable and just comfortable to hold and comfortable to look at is a delight for me. It's my favorite thing ever, which is why I wanted to make this video, because I realized when I was compiling this that I have so many different editions that half of them I did not even know existed. So I hope there was some use from this video. I'm going to mark the whole thing so that you can jump around through chapters and see the book that you're interested in. I hope it was informative in any type of way. I would love to do this again for another type of book, for example, like types of fantasy books or whatever, but classics are that thing that like there's so many editions that you really don't know which one to get. For example, for my birthday, I'll just use that as an example, I'm buying A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, which I just read by Mark Twain, and finding an edition that I want is absolutely horrendous, because I think I'm going to get the Oxford Classics edition of it, but finding an edition and risking the font not being as good or risking the copy not being as floppy is just a pain in the ass, frankly. So I will see you in the next video. I've yapped enough.